Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 30, part 1 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we commence the deep dive into January of 1969, including the concerts and itinerary associated with the 1969 European tour. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. According to Noel Redding, instead of becoming a new plateau for the experience, 1969 became the dregs. Once again, we spent less of our free time together, not even attending business meetings together. Usually I went alone with Jerry Stickles, rarely Mitch and never Jimmy. When we got together for gigs, we were often short-tempered and peevish. We'd use girls to get back at each other. Jimmy still hated it if I pulled a girl after or instead of him. He retaliated with nasty little tricks like spiking her with acid. Our lack of normal life, whatever that was, destroyed us more than anything. Living in a void, empty days between gigs drove me crazy with confusion and apprehension. We no longer had much in common with our friends who had grown away from us, and we'd replaced them with fan-type acquaintances so we wouldn't feel alone. Road life was filled with travel. Light pre-gig entertainment followed by the show, followed by getting smashed and laid. The gigs were so huge that it had been ages since we could nip out of the hall between shows to relax, or even leave our top security dressing room prisons. It was simply too dangerous. Only Jerry Stickles' careful planning saved us from being ripped to shreds several times. If the dressing room was a mile away, like it often was in sports stadium places, I learned how to wait a few minutes on stage after we'd finished before crawling on hands and knees through the crowd. My rule of survival became, as much as possible, stay away from people. Wednesday, the 1st of January, and Jimi Hendrix records at the Record Plant Studios, New York City. Also on January 1st, the German music magazine Bravo runs a feature article on the Jimi Hendrix experience, while All Along the Watchtower sits at number 20 on the singles chart. Thursday, the 2nd of January, and Jimmy flies from JFK Airport, New York, to London Heathrow Airport, and moves into 23 Brook Street, London, with Kathy Etchingham. Friday, the 3rd of January, Jimmy is interviewed at his London apartment by reporter Jonathan King. He also receives the following international telegram from Jeffrey and Chandler in New York City, which reads as follows. Jimmy, Henry Steingarten asked to see you last Sunday to protect your interests, which in some cases conflict with Char's. Told you were on vacation. Get your attorney in USA, or I'm starting lawsuit for your publishing immediately. Stop burying your head in the sand. Kindest regards, Mike. Saturday, the 4th of January, sees the Jimi Hendrix experience at the BBC Television Centre, London, for a television appearance with singer LULU on her show A Happening for LULU. Also on the same day, Jimmy gives interviews to Tony Norman of the Music Weekly Top Pops Music Now and Chris Welch for Melody Maker. Behind the scenes of the show, A Happening for LULU. While Jimmy and the group begin a revised version of Hey Joe with a very free intro, Hendrix suddenly stops. He announces on the microphone, "We'd like to stop playing this rubbish and dedicate a song to the Cream." Cream had announced their separation 2 months earlier, hence the tribute. The experience then launches into an instrumental version of the Cream classic, Sunshine of Your Love. The original plan called for the Jimi Hendrix experience to open their set with Voodoo Child's Light Return, then play their first hit, Hey Joe, with LULU joining Hendrix on stage at the end to sing the last bars with him, before continuing his regular show act. By all accounts, Jimmy was horrified to learn that the producer of the series wanted to make him sing with the star of TUES with Love. Mitch Mitchell recalled, "The main thing to say about the LULU show is that as soon as we arrived, they said, as they had done with the Dusty Springfield show, what about a duet? Gotta do a duet with LULU." At the rehearsals, Hendrix said, "No problem. We'll do the duet on the show. We'll deal with it then." I think she was supposed to do Hey Joe or something. Before the show itself comes the story of the lost substance. We were hanging around in the dressing room and waiting to go on, getting bored as you also do on these occasions, and Noel decided to roll a joint. Not the best idea, considering where we were. Unfortunately, he dropped the stuff down the sink. Panic. Absolute panic. What do we do? I decide, no problem, pick up the phone and call maintenance. The guy arrives and we tell him we have lost a ring, so he proceeds to take the entire sink apart. As soon as we got close to the relevant pipe, "We're going. Don't worry, it's all right, we'll get it back." He, of course, is saying, "No, lads, it's all right, it's me job." Noel is literally having to force him out of the way. but we eventually got it. Anyway, come the show, we played our number, and then at the end of the show, Lulu starts to walk across to the camera, expecting naturally to do the duet. But Hendrix goes into his thing about Cream, and off we go into Sunshine of Your Love. It seemed to go down quite well. We went back to the dressing room, quick change, and then up to the BBC club for a drink. We walk in there and someone said the inevitable, "You will never work for the BBC again." The arm was pointing at the door. Lulu, bless her heart, didn't mind at all. One thing to make clear about it is that it was a spontaneous thing, at least as far as I was concerned. Hendrix may have planned it from the afternoon, who knows? Also, of course, Cream had announced their retirement back in August 1968 or something, and I think Jimmy was basically wishing them luck for whatever each of them was going to do. Either way, I'm really proud that we did it, and I'm glad Hendrix had the balls to carry it through. It's really what live TV is all about. You can actually see a look of surprise on my face, and my drumming on it does leave something to be desired, but what the hell? While Noel Redding remembered, we were booked for the LULU show, which was so straight it was only natural that we would try to combat that atmosphere by having a smoke in our dressing room. In our haste, the lump of hash got away and slipped down the sink drain pipe. Panic. We just couldn't do this show straight. Lulu didn't approve of smoking. She was then married to Maurice Gibb of the Bee Gees, whom I'd visited and shared a smoke with. I could always tell when Lulu was due home, when Maurice started throwing open all the windows. Anyway, I found a maintenance man, and we succeeded in our task and had a great smoke. And in relation to the Cream dedication, Noel added, "This was fun for us, but producer Stanley Dorfman didn't take it at all well as the minutes ticked by on his live show. Short of running onto the set to stop us or pulling the plug, there was nothing he could do." Afterwards, Dorfman refused to speak to us, but the result is one of the most widely used bits of the film we ever did. Certainly, it's the most relaxed. The 4th of January also saw the Jimi Hendrix Experience featured in the following music and underground press publications. Well, January 1969 edition, Melody Maker, January 4th edition where Electric Ladyland featured at number 15 on the Top 20 Albums chart, and New Musical Express, January 4th edition, which featured Electric Ladyland at number 14 on the Top 15 Albums chart. Sunday the 5th of January, at Polydor Studios, London, Jimmy takes part in a long session with the group EIRE Apparent for their song Rock and Roll Band for the group's Sunrise album. He gives his opinion on the sound, drums, and records several guitar overdubs in front of the enthusiastic members of the band. Monday, the 6th of January, Jimmy is interviewed by Don Short for the Daily Mirror at Jimmy's London flat, which is published January 11th, 1969. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in German music magazine, Bravo, January 6th edition. Tuesday, the 7th of January, Jimmy is interviewed by Hugh Curry, Canadian disc jockey, on the CBC program Through the Eyes of Tomorrow. Hendrix also celebrates his 49th day in the apartment at 23 Brook Street by drinking a glass of rosé with Kathy Etchingham. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the music magazine, Look, January 7th edition. The 1969 European tour, according to MITCH. Shortly after the LULU show, we started the European tour. This time, and this was another scatterbrained Mike Jefferies scheme, we would film the whole tour. Good idea, but he got these filmmakers, Gold and Goldstein, who had already filmed the Philharmonic gig, to do it. They came along with us, filmed everything in sight, but what happened to the film we do not know. The tour itself was fine. The usual well-organized German gigs, where we were well taken care of, another road tour drive, get to the gig, soundcheck, hotel. It would have been good, especially by this stage, to have had time off between the gigs, if only to get the equipment set up properly in each place. We were generally down to one show per night, which was much better, and it meant we could stretch out. Sound checks were playing a more prominent part too, but we were still primarily using the house PA. On the whole, we enjoyed the tour. We all liked being on the road, but it was a bit of a grind. While Noel recalled, we rowed about Mitch's and my desire to include England in our 1969 European tour. In the past year, we'd spent 10 months in the US. A European tour would generate less than half the income of another American one and take longer, especially if we included England. To tour America at this stage, we would only have to do a couple of weeks' worth of huge concerts in major cities spaced across the country. To get Jimmy off the hook, Jeffrey told the press that I wouldn't tour. In fact, I was the only one saying that if we didn't tour, we'd break up immediately for sure. Wednesday the 8th of January, while still in London, Jimmy grants a radio interview to Keith Altham, which will be broadcast on January 18th, 1969, on the BBC show Seen and Heard. Then the band flies to Torslanda Airport in Gothenburg for the first leg of the European tour, where they perform 2 shows at the Lawrenceburg Circus, Göteborg, Sweden, supported by Burning Red Ivanhoe and Ginhouse Blues Group. SETLIST for the second show: Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Foxy Lady, Red House, The Sunshine of Your Love, I Don't Live Today, Hear My Train A-Comin', Spanish Castle Magic with drum solo, Purple Haze, and Star Spangled Banner. Noel had this to say about the first Swedish gigs. The wheels were turning, and we were off for Europe on the 8th and start that very night in Gothenburg. And why was Chaz there? I didn't understand why he was on the tour if he was no longer involved with us. Apparently he still was, as part of Jeffrey and Chandler Limited, just not hands-on anymore. Maybe he was with Heir Apparent, who joined the tour on the 11th. On the whole, I can't understand how anyone who saw this tour could have liked the group. Swedish TV did a lot of filming, and compared to the films that they did on the 1967 tour, it was a different group. Hendrix was sullen and removed. He rarely bothered to sing. The sparkle is gone, gone, gone. We were very tired and very bored, and it showed. We were playing these same songs for so long it became sloppy. And it was over, as we looked over the crowd with dead eyes. No wonder Chaz wasn't interested when Jimmy asked him in Gothenburg to become our manager. It was a dire concert. Well, you just could see there was trouble in the band. It didn't work, there was friction, it wasn't together. Noel goes on to say, we hated playing Sweden. Always the same problem, no drugs. We were forced to drink the killer schnapps, and it brought out Jimmy's mood for the first set. In desperation, I went out between shows and with much persistence managed to score a leaper. We huddled anxiously over the dressing room table, crushed the pill into powder, shared it out, and snorted it. The second show was much more together and enthusiastic. The following is a review of the concert based on an audience member's recording from that evening, presumably the first concert. Of the 2 concerts given by the Experience on January 8, 1969, only traces of one remain. On paper, it is a very interesting recording. It marks the start of the Experience's European tour vintage 1969. It is unfortunately one of the group's worst performances, weighed down by technical problems, a lack displays enthusiasm, and an uninspired leader. The concert opens with Voodoo Child, Slight Return, which is not often. The group starts off on a good basis, but is quickly overtaken by technical problems. Jimmy's amp produces howls that he cannot control. Jimmy takes the time to retune and launches Foxy Lady, despite his sound problems. The version is very average, but it is nevertheless one of the highlights of the evening. I assume Jimmy uses his white Gibson SG on Red House. What a mistake. He plays it horribly badly, combining lack of inspiration and poor execution in proportions that are extremely rare for him. This is one of the worst versions of the group. Jimmy misses his bends with an almost unthinkable regularity when you know what he's capable of. There is a first cut during the introduction and a second, definitive one, during the a cappella passage of the central solo. Jimmy then literally massacres the theme of Sunshine of Your Love, while the problems of uncontrolled sounds resurface. On I Don't Live Today, Jimmy finds a little color, and his strat, the two undoubtedly go hand in hand. The central solo begins with a quote from the Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows, followed by a completely free improvisation, which is perhaps the best moment of the concert. The version of Hear My Train A-Comin' is dull and featureless. Jimmy skips a good part of the text on Spanish Castle Magic, whose central solo is one of his worst. After a notable start, due to his lack of inspiration, Jimmy encountered enormous technical problems, forcing him to give way to a drum solo from Mitch Mitchell. The concert ends with Star Spangled Banner, played entirely with the teeth. Funny, but is that what we expect from a great musician or a clown? Conclusion, one of the worst performances of the group. According to Chaz Chandler, that gig was awful. Well, you could definitely see that there were problems within the band. It wasn't working, there was friction, it wasn't in place. The following is a review from the journal Inconnu, titled Jimi Hendrix Body Music, by Ingmar Glanzelius. There is a kind of music that pays tribute to physical effortlessness. One says about Birgit Nilsson, world-famous Swedish opera singer, that she sings with folded hands. but when she reaches the highest and most difficult notes, she unfolds her fingers to show how easy it is, and that the music is just in the technique and the throat. We got a different kind of music yesterday evening at the circus, the one which blows away mere technique, and instead grabs the music with the whole body and strains. Jimi Hendrix music is clearly physical, partly because it's so intense and strong that it forces its way into the listener's body, and partly because one can see and hear that the performers are working hard. Hendrix played several of the old songs from his records, but in a completely different way. He transforms them into fragments, references, and springboards. They are a platform from which he jumps into the world of total sound. I don't believe I have ever seen a player draw the last resource from his instrument like he did. The guitar rarely sounds like a guitar, but instead like an organ, a choir, an electronic apparatus, or a cello. He played the strings with his hands, his stomach, and his teeth. He had the courage to challenge melodies, harmonies, and breaks. It became a form of music which lived to transform itself, not resemble itself. I have never heard Jimi Hendrix so free and bold. His conversation with bass and drums was flowing in large quantities and always very intense for two reasons. The whole trio worked hard, physically kicking each other through the sound. At the beginning of the evening, we heard Gothenborg's Gin House, who relied more on melody and monotonous rhythm rather than on their ability to play. They let the rhythm plod on, and that's a risky manner of playing. A vital contrast against the rhythm is required. It was there with the guitarist, but not with the singer, who was too Birgit Nilsson-like. But there is power and joy at the basis of Gin House. It's probably the courage that's still lacking. Hansen and Carlson didn't come and were replaced by the Danish group Burning Red Ivanhoe, a fine and ambitious group, maybe too ambitious with the desire to break through. They offered nicely arranged songs with a lot of contrast. A shy flute player, who turned out to be a straight harmonica player. They sang in Danish, which could just as well have been Egyptian. I suspect by the group's ironic attitude that it is more effective locally. Thursday the 9th of January. The Experience travel to Stockholm, where they attend a press reception and are interviewed for the Pop 69 special TV show at the Retlind Carlton Hotel. Also present, journalists from Aftonbladet, Expressen, Bildjournalen and Dagens Nyheter. Later that evening they perform at Concerthuset, Stockholm for 2 shows, with support act Jethro Tull. Jimmy announces that he will mainly jam an off microphone. He declares that the audience won't know the difference anyway. The first show is filmed. The second show was recorded on tape for the Swedish TV show, The Number 9. As he enters the stage, Jimmy wears a rose on the end of his Fender guitar, and he dedicates this concert to the American Deserter Society, and also to Eva Sundquist, who always sends him roses. It was during this night in room 405 of the Carlton Hotel that James Daniel Sundquist, also called Jimmy Jr., was conceived, one of Jimi Hendrix's 2 children, whose paternity he would not recognize. Set list for the first show at 7 p.m. Killing Floor, Spanish Castle Magic, Fire, Hey Joe, Voodoo Child Slight Return, Red House, Sunshine of Your Love, and the second show at 9:30 p.m. I Don't Live Today, Spanish Castle Magic, Hey Joe, Voodoo Child Slight Return, Sunshine of Your Love, Red House, Fire, Purple Haze, and Star Spangled Banner. Friday the 10th of January, and the Experience travels to Denmark, where they perform 2 shows at the Falconer Centre at Copenhagen, supported by Jethro Tull. That day, the Experience was to play at Fishmongers Arms Wood Green in London. Jimmy wanted to make this concert as a rehearsal before the shows at the Royal Albert Hall in London planned for February. Pink Floyd and 10 years after replaced Hendrix following his cancellation and the Experience's European tour. Photographer Ola Eilegard Jorgensen remembers the Falconer Centre performance. During the first show I was there, Michael Thurland was there too. I sat in the 35th row. Michael was on the balcony. Good performance. Some equipment was borrowed from The Who following a theft of equipment back in London. Set list for the first show: Fire, Foxy Lady, Tax Free, Spanish Castle Magic, Red House, The Sunshine of Your Love, I Don't Live Today, The Star Spangled Banner and Purple Haze. And the second show: Johnny B. Good, Sunshine of Your Love, Red House, Fire, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Foxy Lady, Spanish Castle Magic, and They Getting My Heart Back Together Again. Also around this time, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazines and underground press: Hit Week, January 10th edition, and the Chicago Seed, January 10th, 24 edition. That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will continue the deep dive into January of 1969 of the Hendrix story, including the 1969 European tour. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any stories or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you.